Don't like the thing. There we go. All right. We are live. Sorry about the 3-minute delay. I can explain in just a second when we get to the question, but I was looking some stuff up. Doing a little bit of research before I answer one specific question, Steve specifically. Yeah, welcome in everybody to the May 31st Friday afternoon live stream. Hope everybody had a fantastic week. Hope everybody had a short week after Memorial Day, if you have off. Hopefully you did. But hopefully it was a good week. Hopefully this upcoming week, as we get into June, is going to be really, really good for you guys as well, too. So we already got questions coming in. People are already prepared for the Friday afternoon live stream. So kick things off with Peter. How do you feel about back end of round one of one quarterback rookie drafts? Have the 107, 109, 111, and 112 been tough to make any trades? Should be able to get BTJ Brooks at 107, but so many question marks with the other wide receivers available. So good question. So the back end of one quarterback rookie drafts is essentially the beginning of the second round for Superflex leagues, right? Because when you don't necessarily have Caleb will probably still be somewhere in the top 8 or 9. Jane Daniels might sneak into the first round for one quarterback leagues, but you don't have Drake May, you don't have JJ McCarthy, so that's pushing up the running backs and wide receivers that are normally in the second round up into the first round for one quarterback. My head is mad dusty. Anyway, so that has been an area that I've identified in Superflex that I don't really want a lot of picks because I don't want to end up making those decisions. So any way that I can try to package those picks and move up to get better players or better prospects that I have more faith and more confidence in, that is something that I want to do. So you said that you should be able to get BTJ Brooks at the 107. That's fantastic. I love that. But how can we turn the 111 and 112 into another, into the 105 or into the 1.06? And instead of taking two shots at Keon Coleman and Xavier Leggett and Ricky Pearsall and Jalen Polk and all those guys, how can you just leave the draft with, Brooks and BTJ, or go up and get Rome Odunze, go up and get Brock Bowers? How are you able to, leave with better overall prospects than just a multitude of kind of meh prospects? And I get the argument of if you want to try and just have more dart throws, but they might not even be all that good of prospects anyway. It might not end up being good players. So I just want the better prospects. So that's how I would attack it. If you end up sticking with these picks, I'd love to get BTJ Brooks at 107. If the other one's still there at 109, that would be fantastic. And leave with both of those with your top 9 picks. And then 111, 112, for me, that would probably end up being like Keon Coleman and Xavier Leggett because of how I rank them. That's probably, maybe Trey Benson is in there as well too. So it'd probably end up being 2 of Coleman, Leggett, and Benson for 111, 112 is how I would go about it. But I'd love to trade up and see what I can do. Steve, so this was the question that I took a couple minutes to actually research a little bit. How would you rank Luther Burden compared to this year's wide receivers? For those of you that don't know, Luther Burden is the wide receiver out of Missouri who is pretty consensus the wide receiver 1 in the 2025 class. So how would I compare Luther Burden to this year's wide receivers? I went through and I just kind of went and checked off how many check boxes he checks in my marker system already as a sophomore, because he had a massive over 30% dominator rating. So a 19-year-old, 30% breakout age in 2023. He has the fantasy points per game to go with it. He's got the pretty stereotypical size. I think he's listed around 5'11", 205 or 5'11", 210, something like that, depending on, he might be 6 foot. But that's around where he's listed at right now. He's 20 years old and he's going to be an early declared, going to be a first round pick next year. So he's all of that going on for him. And based on all of that, and assuming that he hits some other athleticism markers at the combine, he's going to grade in somewhere in and around Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze. So I don't think that he would surpass Marvin Harrison. I honestly, I don't think that he would surpass Malik Neighbors. He might. That would be pretty close. But I think it would be a really good conversation between him and Rome Odunze. And he's definitely better than everybody else out. He's better than BTJ, better than Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, Lab McConkey for sure. He's better than all those guys. It would really just be a conversation between him versus Neighbors and Odunze. That's kind of how I would slot in Luther Burden compared to this year's crop of wide receivers. John, happy Friday. Welcome in, my man. Toronto Dave is in the chat as well, too. Jordan Davis, happy Friday. Mustang had a question. In a Superflex half PPR 12 team start 10. Is selling a wide receiver for Jonathan Brooks a good idea to you? Also, wouldn't mind Tyjae Spears. Out of the group of wide receivers, I'm not opposed to it. Out of the group of wide receivers that you have, I'd be willing to trade away Higgins, DK, or JSN. One of those three for Jonathan Brooks. I'm completely willing to do that just because I have so much confidence in Brooks. I'm working on my running back rankings video. It's already recorded. I'm editing it right now. That's going to drop early next week. People might be surprised by how high Jonathan Brooks is in that video. That's just how much confidence that I have in him. And I think that he's being super undervalued and underrated right now because the running back class as a whole was and has been deemed not great since basically the start of the year, since January. And I think Jonathan Brooks is getting dragged down by that and a little bit by his ACL injury as well, too, to where if he hadn't have torn his ACL, I think we would be talking about Jonathan Brooks as a Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor. I think those two were underdrafted in the NFL, but I think that's kind of the range that we would be looking at with Jonathan Brooks. So I'd be willing to do it. If you can trade Lockett and second and go get Tyjae Spears, I'm not opposed to that as well too. But Higgins, DK, JSN, I'd be willing to send one of those three for Brooks. Maybe the other guy has a preference, and just go with that. Kai with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Kai. He says that he has Jonathan Taylor on a bad orphan that he took over in a Superflex PPR league. Offers are JT Pittman in a third for the 1.02, or JT in a third for 104, or for the 110 and the 2.01. Holy moly. Okay. I'm assuming by bad orphan, like you just really need all the other positions. Like you don't have, like if you get Caleb Williams, that's great. If you get Marvin Harrison Jr., that's great. Not sure if I want to add Michael Pittman to Jonathan Taylor to go up and get one of those two. But John says that the 104 deal is definitely the way to go. And that's kind of when I was reading these off, like I don't want the 110 and the 201. That's kind of something where when I was talking about with the first question with Peter is I don't really want to be in that range for Superflex leagues. And how can I try and trade up? So I would easily take the 1.04 over the 110 and 201. So we're just going to nix off this last trade because they're the same in terms of what you're giving up. So it's really, do you want to add Michael Pittman to the 1.04 essentially to go up and get the 1.02? And I don't think I want to do that. If it's Caleb Williams, I'd think about it hardcore. If the 101 ends up going Marvin Harrison and the 102 is Caleb Williams, I would really, really consider it. But I would take Malik Neighbors, especially on a bad orphan, over Jonathan Taylor. So I think I would take the 1.04 deer here, and you'll probably end up with Malik Neighbors. Or if Malik Neighbors goes 103 and you get Jane Daniels, then that's fantastic, and you get to keep Michael Pittman. Exactly like what John said. So, so yeah, that's how I would attack it. I take the 1.04 deal, take Neighbors or Jane Daniels, whichever one of those two is there. Keep Michael Pittman. Continue on building for the future. Love it. Thanks for the super chat, Kai. Thank you for the support. Jordan, would you trade away McBride for an equal value wide receiver in a non-tight end premium 12-team Superflex? Your other tight ends are Bowers and Ingram. I'm a contender and need one more wide receiver. Interesting. So I feel like Bowers or McBride would be on the trading block here because you have the upside of Brock Bowers, but you also have kind of the known of Trey McBride. Ingram is a fantastic backup, and obviously he's not going to net you anywhere near the wide receiver that Bowers or McBride would. I feel like you could probably toss both out onto the trade block and see what happens. You might be able to get a pretty similar wide receiver. And if somebody out there is like, well, I see McBride and Bowers equally, I would rather I would rather trade Bowers away and keep McBride. I have McBride value just a slightly higher because again of the known. If you're looking in terms of which players that you could potentially get, um, you're probably down in the Tank Dell, George Pickens. You might be able to sneak a Metcalf or a T Higgins, but I don't think you're really going to get anything more than that. Like, I don't think you're going to be able to get DJ Moore or Michael Pittman or Nico Collins anymore after the extension. You're probably more living in that Tank Dell, George Pickens area and range, which I would do. I'd be comfortable doing that. Or if you can get somebody like Brian Thomas Jr. plus for Brock Bowers, I would love to do that. Maybe an older wide receiver, and you get an even bigger plus, like a Mike Evans plus a 26 first or something like that for Brock Bowers. You might be able to get done. I'm not sure, but that's kind of the range that you're looking at for wide receivers in there. The real thing that might help you narrow it down is identify which teams really need that elite tight end, and then that gives you basically the pool of wide receivers that you have to be able to go for. And we can see how that works out. Buy Apple Pie, 12-team Superflex, start 11. Give Gibbs, get Achane, Worthy, and Singletary. Man, I feel like just on a value basis alone, the Achane Worthy side is the better side to have. I'm not necessarily the biggest Achane fan. Um, and there is a lot more risk, I think, with Achane and Worthy, just in terms of, can Achane stay healthy? Can he maintain a good enough volume to where you kind of don't have to rely on big play efficiency every single week for him to do something? I would like to see him get a little bit more, just enough volume just to be able to get to, 7 or 80 yards pretty easily and not really have to think about it. And then you have the dice roll on him getting 150 yards and a couple touchdowns. Worthy kind of in the same boat. Is he going to be high enough on the target share totem pole to where he's actually consistent every single week? Or is he going to be a big play guy? It kind of feels like on a value basis, you could probably sneak away with a better deal by then flipping Achane and Worthy for more than just Jahmyr Gibbs. So if you feel like you can do that, I might do that. But I think if you're in a league where it's not necessarily a very active league, I think I would keep Jahmyr Gibbs just because of the upside for him and just the better player, more confidence in that player. But it's on a value side, it's not a bad deal, especially if you can then try and flip Achane and Worthy, like I said, for more than Gibbs, which might be like you could flip both of them for Brees Hall and a third, and then that you basically got a free third round pick, and you got a free Devin Singletary by doing that. If you could do that, that'd be cool. Cuban Kid 15 just traded Amon-Ra for the 1.03, got Jaden Daniels and a 25 first and a 25 second in a Superflex league. You are rebuilding. Do you think that you won the trade? It's a very interesting trade. Daniels and a first and second for Amon-Ra. I would imagine that first and second are playoff first and seconds already. And if they weren't, you just gave them Amon-Ra. So it probably is going to end up being a playoff first. But that's okay. You're rebuilding. Figuring out the quarterback position is definitely probably step one for a Superflex league. I don't know if I would have necessarily used Amon-Ra to do that, but I do really like Jaden Daniels. Obviously, the first and second are great and can only gain in value from here on out. So I think that this trade is probably going to go down as a net positive for both you and the other person taking on Amon-Ra. But I just don't know if I would have mortgaged Amon-Ra like that to take the dice roll on Jaden Daniels. Even though I have big time confidence in Daniels, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. You know what I mean? I feel like it's a good trade. I feel like it's a good trade on both sides. So I don't know if you necessarily can say you won. I think both sides won. Gavin, in a 12-team Superflex PPR, would you move Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, Ramondre Stevenson, and Gibson, and Vidal for Dak, Pittman, and Jacobs? Holy crap. Yes, I would. I'm going to basically cross off Love and Dak. I want Pittman over. I would take Pittman over Reed and Ramondre, and I would take Jacobs over Gibson and Vidal for sure. So yeah, I'm taking Dak, Pittman, and Josh Jacobs. I kind of had to work that in my brain in terms of just how many players are getting moved here, but yes, I would take Dak, Pittman, Josh Jacobs here. Brooks is RB9 on KTC. Holy schmoly. I'm still higher, but that is definitely higher than where I thought he was. He is RB9 in the same tier as Saquon, Walker, and Kyron. I'm still higher on Brooks, but it's not by much. Man, that's interesting to see that he's so much higher on KTC. Maybe I'm helping to pull that. Maybe everybody just listens to me. Definitely not. That's not what happened. Better than McConkey for sure. Yes, he is. A lot of wide receivers are better than McConkey. Seth can only keep 10 players in a 12-team best ball, one quarterback. Would you trade a 25-second for Zamir White with this as your roster? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you have to, if you make this move, you'd have to cut 2 people off of this cut list. Which, like, I would keep Zamir White over. Zamir White would be your automatic RB1. Yeah, I would. I'd be all right doing that. One quarterback league. Even when you add in all the other players that you have to cut, it's still, I don't think it's still not really going to push anybody down for a 25-second to be worth anything much more than what it already is just with rookies. I would do that. And Zamir would be your automatic RB1. You don't want to have to keep Roshan then, and you probably wouldn't have to keep I don't know who your second. Would you not keep Herbert then? Maybe just get rid of both Bears running backs. I would do it. You can make your keeper decision later, but I would do it because Zamir White would be your RB1. Not that I love Zamir White or anything like that, but I just think that he's good enough. West Coast cheaper in a 12x9 Superflex PPR inbox offer. Give 106, 107, get 102, and the 3.02. Ooh. Oh my. So there's a couple ways to look at this. I think the ultimate answer is I would take the 1.02. If it's Marvin Harrison Jr. that you get the 102, I would take Marvin Harrison Jr. over Odunze and Bowers, or Odunze and one of the quarterbacks, or Bowers and one of the quarterbacks. So I would take Marvin Harrison over them. If it's Caleb, I would take Caleb over having both the quarterbacks in May and McCarthy, or Odunze and both quarterbacks, or Bowers or both quarterbacks, or Odunze and Bowers. I'd be willing to do it. If you need depth, like if it's you only really have to start 9, so that's not bad. So I feel like getting the better player in Marvin Harrison or Caleb is just going to be better for you overall. So I'd be willing to take the 1.02 unless you like desperately need, like you don't even have a QB2 and you can get both the quarterbacks, May and McCarthy there, or you can get at least one of them and then still get a Dunze or something like that. Probably also depends on the complete direction of your team. Like if you're truly that 1.02, or sorry, if you were like the 106, 107, you probably are competing, or are more in the direction of competing, unless you tore things down. It feels like this is kind of team dependent, but I'd be willing to do this for the 1.02. BG Gaming, 12-team Superflex, half PPR, tight end premium, start 10. Got Herbert, Love, James Cook, Warren, Jay Jettis, Tank, Ferguson, Flowers, BJ, and Stevenson's. What moves should I be making to compete? I'm not going to lie to you. I don't want Justin Herbert to compete in 2024. I'm so terrified. I could be so wrong on that, but I'm just so terrified of this offense that Harbaugh and Greg Roman are coming in with, and how much that Herbert has really relied on complete volume over his past 3 or 4 years. And now that volume, it's not going to entirely go away, but if you drop his volume down by 75 pass attempts or more, that's going to really, especially with all the weapons that he has, or I guess doesn't have. I'm so terrified of Justin Herbert. I would love to see how I can move him and go to Dak Prescott or Trevor Lawrence or Kyler Murray. That would be probably step number 1 for me with your team. Step number 2 would probably be start 10. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think honestly it would be just getting rid of Justin Herbert. If you can move Herbert to another kind of comparable quarterback and even potentially get something on top, that's like a handcuff running back that you can throw in whenever he's the starter, because the starter ahead of him got hurt. If it's another depth kind of wide receiver or something like that, a backup tight end behind Ferguson, I think you have a very, very good core here. And I don't know what kind of draft picks that you have for next year. I wouldn't really try to trade your first next year, but if you have an extra second rounder that you can then throw, and you can get like Aaron Jones or something like that, or you can get a Joe Mixon, or any kind of moves in that regard, then that could be something that you could do as well. But I think Justin Herbert is probably number 1 for me. Elixin, that's a cool name. 12-team Superflex, 1 tight end premium. I have a house money team, but I have the worst running back room in the league with Kamara, Najee, and Eckler. Would you wait until the season to trade for a running back, or move 25s for an old running back? That's not a bad running back room. Out of all the teams in your league, I would feel like you don't have the worst. It's not great. You'd be in the bottom. I do agree with that, but I don't think it's the worst. I would wait until the season to see what happens. I would not do any moves right now, because we still have 3 more months basically before any real football gets played. So much can happen in terms of injuries. Depth chart moves can change. Players can get cut. Like, remember, like Fournette just got cut from the Jags for whatever reason. Thankfully, he ended up landing in Tampa and then did well a few years ago. But like stuff like that happens. Like I would not do anything now until you get into the actual season. And you might honestly, depending on how good the rest of your roster is, like if you're saying it's that great, you might not need better running backs than that. You might just be able to get carried by your quarterbacks, by the tight ends in the premium that you have, by any elite wide receivers that you have. You might not need more running backs, or especially older running backs, because you already have maybe not the worst running back room in the league, but you probably have the oldest running back room in the league. So I don't know if I would continue to add on older running backs. Maybe you could try to see if you could sneak a Javonte Williams for cheap, or maybe go and invest in like Trey Benson. I know somebody probably just draft him in a rookie draft, but if you can go get like Trey Benson, that adds late season upside plus 2025 upside for you as well too. That's how I'd probably be addressing the running back position, is waiting until the season starts, unless you get a good deal on somebody, and then just see what happens. Gavin, DJ Moore and Tony Pollard, or Terry McLaurin and Jonathan Brooks? I'll take DJ Moore and Tony Pollard here. I feel like the main reason for this one is the difference between DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin is a lot bigger for me than the difference between Brooks and Tony Pollard. I do really love Jonathan Brooks. I also really like Tony Pollard too. So if you're going for production, which I'd imagine that you are, I would go for DJ Moore and Tony Pollard. Um, yeah, if you're looking to age down, it's not bad to get Jonathan Brooks. I just don't think that Terry McLaurin would be if you're trying to age down or you're trying to reconstruct or even rebuild and get younger. I don't think Terry McLaurin would be the way to go. So that's why I'm kind of reading this trade as like you're just looking for production standpoint. I'll take DJ Moore and Tony Pollard. Zach in a 12-team Superflex PPR, give Chase Trevor Lawrence in a mid-second to get Anthony Richardson, AJ Brown, and Deebo Samuel. Currently flexing 2 of Warren, McLaurin, Wicks, Cooks, or Bateman, so Deebo would really help there. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that's a win. Like you're getting the higher valued quarterback in Anthony Richardson, potentially the higher productive quarterback in Anthony Richardson as well, too, assuming that he stays healthy and continues to be what he did for those 2 healthy games last year. AJ Brown and Chase is more valuable, but AJ Brown's been more productive over the past couple of years just because of Chase's health, Burrow's health, blah, blah, blah. You'll lose some dynasty value from that, but you won't really lose production. You might honestly gain production. And then you'll take Deebo over a mid to late second round pick. So yeah, I think I'd take the Anthony Richardson, AJ Brown, and Deebo Samuel side. You could try to see if you don't really want to give up Chase or Trevor Lawrence to try to make the trade smaller and just focus around what can you add to the second to just really go get Deebo. I'd be fine with that too. Like if it's like, McLaurin in the second for Deebo or Cooks in the second or Wicks in the second or something like that. For Deebo, then you technically lost the starter, but you got an upgraded starter. You know what I mean? So you could try and do that too if you just want to keep chasing Trevor Lawrence. But I think as an entire package, I'll take Anthony Richardson, AJ Brown, and Deebo Samuel. Here's an interesting one for you, Jordan. Would you tear down from Hurts to another quarterback and try to get a stud wide receiver? Other QBs are Anthony Richardson, Kyler, and Daniel Jones. Yes. I almost wonder if you could tear down from Anthony Richardson. Then you keep Hurts and Kyler. Although I guess if you're tearing down from Anthony Richardson, you probably won't get a stud of it. You might. It's close. What I would probably do is I would look at the teams that have Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins or Matthew Stafford or Baker Mayfield. Anyone, even honestly Deshaun Watson as well too. Any of those 5, I would look at the teams that have those 5 quarterbacks, and then I would look at their wide receivers. First of all, see if they need better quarterbacks. Like if they would be a team that it would make sense to upgrade from one of those quarterbacks to get a more elite quarterback, and then see what wide receivers they have as well too, because then that's going to tell you what wide receivers are possibly in range for you. So if you can trade down, for example, we'll stick with Hurts. So if you trade down from Hurts to Jared Goff, are you able to add a like Garrett Wilson, I guess would be in that range. Maybe you can sneak Puka. You might have to drop down even more. You might do it with like Watson and Puka for Jalen Hurts. That might not be a bad deal. I might be aiming a little too high with my wide receivers. But it's just the wide receivers after that are so weird because then you get into Malik Neighbors or Tyreek Hill. But I don't think a team that's producing and upgrading for a quarterback would want to give away Tyreek Hill. Maybe if they want to get younger, they could. Then you get into like Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle. That could work as well too. But I feel like I need a slightly better quarterback to be able to do that. Like to go down for London or Waddle or Ayuk because there's a little bit more. There's less production, a little bit more uncertainty there. But yeah, like if you can do that, that would be great. That's kind of how I would. That's kind of how I would go for it if you can do that. Is Trevor Lawrence and Troy Franklin enough for you to get off of Herbert if you're competing? Yes, 100%. Yes, sir. Um, that would be the move. BG Gaming, who had Justin Herbert, there's your way to move off of Justin Herbert. Honestly, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to outscore Justin Herbert, so you just got to free Troy Franklin. You got a free dice roll on a, even though he was a day 3 pick, on still what I think to be a talented wide receiver who should probably be the wide receiver one on his team with his old college quarterback still, Troy Franklin. Yep, absolutely. Obi-Wan Kobe, what do you think about this trade? Waddle and Tony Pollard for Kyron Corum and Christian Watson. Um, I love it. I would take Waddle over the Kyron Corum combo, and I'm taking Tony Pollard over Christian Watson. So you just upgraded in both regards, especially going from Christian Watson to Waddle. That's insane. Um, yeah, give me Waddle and Tony Pollard here. I like that side. Oh, Schmidt, 12 team Superflex PPR non-tight end premium. Should I trade for a quarterback? You have Trevor and Kirk Cousins. I mean, you could. You have so much firepower at all the other positions. Your running back room is insane. Chase, Garrett Wilson as AJ Brown, T Higgins. Holy crap. Um, I mean, you could, but I feel like you don't necessarily have to go nuts with it. Like you could just go and get Jared Goff and then have the streaming option between Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff every week. You could go and do the same thing with, Baker, or even like go and get like Aaron Rodgers, you know, like somebody like that could be really good and kind of non-invasive on your team overall, so that you're not giving up, Brees Hall to go get Jaden Daniels or something like that. You know what I mean? Um, I would try and see how non-invasive you can be and still get a very good streamable quarterback that you are you're starting Trevor Lawrence basically every single week. But then you have the decision between Kirk and the other quarterback, or maybe Trevor isn't as great. So now you just have three kind of similar ish quarterbacks that you just make the decisions from every week based on, you know, um, their weekly opponents and stuff. Stream them. And that'd probably be the way I would look at it. Can you trade away Tyjae Spears for Aaron Rodgers? Probably not. Spears and Watson for Aaron Rodgers? That would be cool. Spears and Watson for uh Deshaun Watson? There you go. That would be kind of how I would look at it. If you I don't know what picks you have for 2025, but that's how I would go about it. Try and see how non-invasive you can get and still get a good player. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Who's looking for a Superflex Dynasty startup? Get with Genji. Let's do it. DJ Moore is your wide receiver 5. Oh, holy crap. I think I'm having trouble just with having Terry McLaurin. That's kind of where I'm at. Love getting Jonathan Brooks there though. But I think it's just Terry McLaurin holding you back for me. I'm not a huge McLaurin fan. Although maybe he's better with, a little better wide receiver than McLaurin would be nice. And maybe he's better with Jane Daniels. I don't know. Russell, one quarterback PPR start 8. My wide receivers are Wilson, Addison, Ridley, and Watson. Would you do Addison the 106 and a 26 second for AJ Brown? Absolutely. I have Hurts as your quarterback. Oh, even better. Javonte and Brian Robinson as your running backs. Also have the 105. Yep, 100%. I'm taking AJ Brown there because you're basically trading away Addison, and we'll just say Worthy or BTJ and a second for AJ Brown. Perfect example of how to trade up at the wide receiver position. Freaking love that. And then the 105, 105, you could take BTJ or Jonathan Brooks. Maybe you just go for Jonathan Brooks because you kind of have a need there and use need as a tiebreaker. Then you have Then you go into the season with Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, and Christian Watson. Then you have Javonte and Jonathan Brooks and B-Rob as your RB3. Hurts is your quarterback to go with the Hurts AJ Brown stack. Beautiful. I'd do it. One quarterback, 14 teams start 8, half PPR for fantasy condo. Malik Neighbors or the 106 and the 111. Malik Neighbors. This is another example of how to just kind of get out of that weird tier down at the end of the first round for one quarterback leagues. Especially in a 14-team start 8, you're going to want the studs and not the depth. Because start 8 leagues, you already prioritize the depth, or already prioritize starters and starting firepower. And then in a 14-team league, then you've just increased your advantage over even more teams and more league mates. So I'm taking Neighbors in this one for sure. Deshaun Watson is so hated that he's a screaming value right now. Absolutely. He just needs. He doesn't even need to return to Deshaun Watson form. I feel like that's what everybody keeps getting hung up on is like, oh, Browns Deshaun Watson is not Texans Deshaun Watson. And I get that. And it sucks. But if you just look at what he is and what he has been in Cleveland, especially last year before the injury, like that's like a more than fine QB2. That's really all you need him for. And you can get him at QB3 prices. So it's just like he's very solid to have on your team for sure. I definitely agree with that. They absolutely were. I think he had 5 top 15 weeks or something like that. Hold on, going in. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 5 top 25 weeks, 4 top 15 weeks before he got injured last year. That's what Watson had. And 3 of those were top 10. So out of 5 fully played games last year for Deshaun Watson, all 5 were in the top 25 for fantasy. 4 of those were top 15. 3 of them were top 10 for QB1 weeks. Deshaun Watson. Weiberg, Dynasty Rebuild. Is Dameon Pierce worth an early third in 2025? I'm just going to take the 3rd round pick. I'll just take the 3rd round pick. I don't mind having handcuffs, but in a rebuild, you're going to find more people that will want to have an early 3rd round pick tacked onto a trade than they will Dameon Pierce. So that makes it a much more movable asset. It frees up a roster spot for you as well, that you can maybe pick somebody else off of waiver wires instead of Dameon Pierce and then flip them for a 3rd. And that's just kind of how you keep the train rolling, gain more picks, move those picks up for better players or better picks, and then you just keep on going from there. So I'd rather have the 3rd round pick than Dameon Pierce. With all the Deshaun Watson talk today, what would you be willing to trade to get him in Superflex to be your QB2 or 3? Anything less than a 1st round pick is fantastic. I would be, if you are a super contender and you still have your 1st round pick next year, and I don't mean just like, oh, I might be contending or I just need my QB2 to contend and blah, blah, blah. But like if you are set at every position and honestly even kind of set at quarterback, I would pay the 1st round pick. But I would, anything less than that would be fantastic. I don't know if 1 2nd round pick gets it done, 2 seconds or Derek Carr in a second just to give somebody else another starter. Sam Howell in a second, because I know people are excited about Howell. Not excited is the wrong word. Are interested in the potential for Sam Howell to be the starting quarterback for Seattle. So give up Howell in a second. Anything like that. 2 seconds. Another player in a second. That's what I would do for Deshaun Watson. Because you don't really have to pay anything much more than that because people hate him. Feel like people are worrying too much about the Giants with Neighbors. Easy talent over situation here. I agree with that. I kind of feel the same way about this with Bowers in Vegas. I just think the talent's going to win out there. He's going to be the easy 2nd target on that team behind Devontae Adams. And then you have the future without Devontae Adams, and Jacoby Myers like 27 right now. So there's a long-term future there with Bowers as well too. But just like there's a long-term future with Malik Neighbors on top of the fact that he's probably just going to get a massive amount of targets. um, I have been comping him to Garrett Wilson, but I will also say that I think Malik Neighbors is a slightly better wide receiver than Garrett Wilson. Um, at worst, they're a wash. But I 100% know that Daniel Jones is better than Zach Wilson or anything else that Garrett Wilson has had in New York. Um, and Dable is a much better coach than anything that Garrett Wilson has had offensively as well too with Hackett and anybody else. So while I think that Garrett Wilson's kind of like the floor that we've seen for the past 2 years, like I think Neighbors I shouldn't say easy. Neighbors is like an easy 950 plus yards this year, if not even a moderately easy 1,000 yard season this year with all the volume that he's going to get. And then that's just going to continue to build on from here on out. Philip, we got 2 questions for you. This one is the easier question. I will take Derrick Henry here. I'm buying into it. Dude, Derrick Henry on the Ravens is going to be freaking nasty, dude. So I will take Derrick Henry for 2024, but it's very, very close. These two guys are probably back to back. As for your other question, 12-team Superflex PPR, 0.75 tight end premium, start 10, 6 point per passing touchdown. Woo. Give DJ Moore any first and second and Senate. Get CeeDee Lamb. All right, so I've seen enough. I'll take CeeDee Lamb. I've seen enough. Just give me Lamb. I don't care so much about the second. I don't really care all that much about Ben Sinnott. You already have Andrews and Ingram as well, too. This is a fantastic way to upgrade to CeeDee Lamb. And Jesus, your team. Your starting lineup in a start 10 is Kyler, Lamar, CMC, Bijan, Kamara, Amon-Ra, Puka, AJ Brown, Tyreek, CeeDee Lamb, Andrews. You're sitting Kamara. You're not even going to be able to play Kamara. That's insane. I think you just posted this just to dab on the haters, just to brag a little bit. I think you posted this just to brag. Give me CeeDee Lamb, and if you don't win just from everybody else just not having assets, then I don't know what I don't know what world we have to live in where you're not winning in 2024. Congratulations, dude. John, can you explain the difference between Olave and Garrett Wilson? Carr isn't great, but was clearly playing through injuries. Rodgers is better than the quarterbacks Garrett Wilson has had, but he isn't what he once was either. Olave is going at least half a round later than Garrett Wilson in startups. The main difference to me, it's Aaron Rodgers. I mean, even if Aaron Rodgers is not what he once was, that is light years better than what Derek Carr has ever been in his life. So, like, I don't necessarily want to look at Aaron Rodgers' final year in Green Bay to say that he is not still Aaron Rodgers, because that final year in Green Bay, he lost Devontae Adams. His best wide receiver was a rookie Christian Watson who played half the year, a rookie Romeo Dobbs. Like, we thought that his time has come after back-to-back seasons of 25 and 26 touchdowns in 2018, 2019. And then 2021 and 2020, 4,100, 4,200 yards, 37 touchdowns, 48 touchdowns. Like, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have a massive chip on his shoulder. And I think that, and again, he's just so much, even 80% Aaron Rodgers is better than 150% Derek Carr. So that to me is the main difference. I do think Chris Olave is kind of stuck in this situation. It just kind of like it's really unfortunate. The touchdowns just really aren't there. They are very similar in terms of a points per game and production per game standpoint. But I just believe that Garrett Wilson has the ability to go nuclear with even like a semi-healthy Aaron Rodgers. He's coming off an Achilles injury. There's no guarantee he'll be anything close to league average. But why though? Why does that really like that's not going to affect his arm? Like it's on his plant foot. I get that. And he's probably not going to be as mobile, but they have a solid offensive line. All he needs to do is just stand in the pocket and deliver semi-catchable passes to Garrett Wilson 8 to 10 times a game, and that's all it is. I feel like people are underrating Aaron Rodgers and underrating how pissed off he's going to be because everybody's also saying the same thing. To where I'm just not going to bet. I've stopped betting against Derrick Henry, and I'm going to stop betting against Aaron Rodgers until he actually just is not Aaron Rodgers. That's the way I see it. Give Bryson a 25 first and receive Jaden Daniels. Low activity league quarterbacks are hard to acquire. Yeah, I'll do that trade. I'll take Jaden Daniels, especially if it's a late first round pick. I would rather have Jaden Daniels than Bryce Young for sure, and I will pay a late first round pick to make that work. Especially in a low activity league, if Bryce Young does not have a year 2 developmental growth with Dave Canales, then he's kind of going to be like a dead asset, which is going to be unfortunate. Jaden Daniels, however, I think has the ability to be the highest scoring rookie quarterback in 2024. And if he does that, especially if he finishes as a top 10 fantasy quarterback, which I don't think is necessarily all that difficult for him to do, then he's going to be probably a top 8 dynasty quarterback next year, if not even slightly higher, like borderline top 5, which quarterbacks are hard to acquire, but then everybody's going to want Jaden Daniels next year too. So then you can mess around and see what happens then. So I'll take Jaden Daniels. I'll take the bet on him over Bryce in a late first. Casanova, 10-team Superflex PPR. I need a direction for my team. Kyler, Penix, May, Carr, Olave, Higgins, Cup, Addison, Ferguson, Sanders. Only running back worth mentioning is Brooks. That's a pretty good running back to mention. Have all 2025 picks still. Okay. So how many players do you have to start, Casanova? Because that's going to impact what I'm about to tell you. 10. Okay. Ooh, that's a good amount. You have a solid team. I like the direction that you're already heading in terms of just staying young, building for the future. You have solid assets, all of whom can mostly gain a lot of value. Cooper Cooper Cup feels like the one part of this that doesn't make sense. So I'd be looking to see if I could trade Cooper Cup. You could try to do some sort of wide receiver maneuvering where you package a couple of them together and just try to move up at the wide receiver position. Even though it is start 10, what that will do for you is that will remove some of the risk of Olave not breaking out in year 3, of Addison not doing well with JJ McCarthy being the wide receiver 2 on the team. Reduce the risk of T. Higgins getting hurt again, all that kind of stuff. Like, as good as all these players could be and they could gain a lot of value, they could also lose that value too, because they are still kind of being propped up by that hope of them gaining value. So you could try to move, you can move Higgins and Cooper Cup, or Cup and Jordan Addison, and go up and get Drake London, or go up and get Malik Neighbors or somebody like that, which still keeps you young, but it also, I think, reduces a lot of the risk that you have. So you could try to do that. You could try to do the same thing kind of with the quarterback position, get rid of, like, trade Carr and May and go and get who would you get with from that? Purdy or Tua maybe? That might not be as good of an idea. I like the wide receiver idea. Keep all of your 2025 picks. If anything, you could just trade Cup for another 25 pick in season when he's actually producing. If you can get a first, that would be fantastic. At any point, if you ever get a first round pick for Cooper Cup, just take it. Don't even ask anybody. But once we get in season, if you get some good assets for Cooper Cup, that might be the play, even if you're not able to package him with somebody else. But basically, you just got to kind of keep going. You're in like a weird spot right now to where I understand why you don't really feel like you have a direction because you're in a really weird spot where you're just kind of sitting and you're not really doing anything. But you just kind of have to keep on going. Make moves as fast as you can for players and make sure that you are one of the most active players in your league in terms of trades because you got to be able to capitalize on value when it's at the highest. You got to be able to try and see if you could take on other players that are at lower value and move up. Minimize risk, add some production. Don't trade away first round picks or really any picks unless you necessarily have to. But please don't trade away first round picks because those are going to be the biggest opportunity for you to get better players like you did this year with May and Penix, even Sanders, Brooks. That's going to be how you continue to do that every year. So I don't really know if I necessarily helped you. I'm sorry. But that's kind of how, like, I understand why it feels like you don't have a direction is because you're just kind of sitting and waiting. But that's okay. Just as long as you move when you need to move. Is this the last sell high window for Kyle Pitts, and would Pacheco be a fair return? I think this is the last major sell window if you really wanted to get out on Kyle Pitts. I don't think that Isaiah Pacheco is a good enough return, though. It's a solid return. But I feel like if somebody really believes in Kyle Pitts, they would be willing to pay a little bit more than Isaiah Pacheco. Maybe that's just me. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Isaiah Pacheco. It's fine. But I think that if Kyle Pitts hits, then he's going to be worth so much more than Isaiah Pacheco. But if you don't, I think Pacheco's all right. I think it's fine. I would still take Kyle Pitts. I'm still willing to roll the dice on that versus a guy that I view as more of like just like an RB2. Would you trade a future second for Dontavian Wicks? No. That's too much. I really like Dontavian Wicks, but I would not pay a future second round pick for him. I'd pay a couple thirds, but I wouldn't go into the second round. Corey, 14 team Superflex start 10 contending teams. Should I send Jordan Addison in a second for Devonta Smith? Yeah, I'm okay with that. I would like to go a little bit higher because I feel like you're just moving from one team wide receiver 2 to another team wide receiver 2. Like I would like for there to be some opportunity of an increase in potential target share or something. Like, can you go to Michael Pittman? Can you go to Nico Collins? I would do it ultimately because I think Devonta Smith is just that much better than Jordan Addison, especially for production on a contending team. But I just don't know if overall that's going to change anything drastically for you. I would still do it though. How do you feel if I move Monty for Najee in PPR in win now mode? I just don't. I don't really know why. They're basically the same. Monty honestly might be better. There's no incentive because they're both RB2s. They both have the potential to be RB1s during any given week if they score touchdowns or anything like that. I will tell you that Monty has a much higher ceiling if Jahmyr Gibbs were to go down. If Jalen Warren were to get hurt, Najee's ceiling doesn't really, it's not all that affected. But if Jahmyr Gibbs got hurt and Monty was just a pure running back, workhorse running back for the Lions, like that's a massive ceiling. I'd rather have David Montgomery than Najee. There's no incentive to move off of Monty for just Najee because they're basically the same. But Monty has a much higher ceiling if his backfield mate gets hurt. Thoughts on next year's running back class? Are you valuing 25 first, even on contenders, a little bit more this year? Yeah, next year's running back class looks pretty solid. There are still a lot of question marks, I think, that need to be answered. Like, can Travion stay healthy? What is even that Ohio State backfield with Travion and Judkins? Can Rocket Sanders come back to form? Can Nick Singleton like actually kind of break out, or is it still going to be him and Katron? Is Katron good enough to get into the first round for dynasty drafts? A couple like Devin Neal still in there too. Who's the other running back that I'm forgetting? Ollie Gordon, is that who it is? There's a lot of good opportunity to have really strong running back class next year. We just still need questions to be answered about them overall, because it's a weird crop of guys who kind of all went back because they weren't going to get a good enough valuation this year. On top of the guys that look promising, but hopefully they continue that. I would trade a late first round pick plus for Brian Thomas Jr. or Jonathan Brooks. And if you're a contender looking for a running back and you have a late first round pick, I would trade that first for Jonathan Brooks. I'd even add a little bit, like I said, to go and get Jonathan Brooks. I'd still value 25 firsts, but I just I keep hitting my microphone. But I just like if you're a contender and you're looking at running backs, I want to see how I can move my late contender first round pick next year just to go up and get Jonathan Brooks. That's how I would look at it. Joe, what's going on, my man? How's it going? How's it going? Zach, what would it take to tear down from Mahomes to Anthony Richardson? Probably a first round pick. And not just like I don't think I would trade Mahomes for Richardson and like a 25 first, but that's probably around ish the value that you're looking at. There's just so much security in having Patrick Mahomes. Like it really does need to feel like the other person has overpaid for Patrick Mahomes because it's Patrick Mahomes. Our analyzer is saying that a future first isn't even enough. It's basically enough. But like a mid 24 first. So if you trade Mahomes for Richardson and Bowers or Odunze or something like that, then that would kind of be where you're looking at. But that even still doesn't feel great. Like I feel like I need more than that. It's probably where the value is, but I'd rather just have Patrick Mahomes, because it's Patrick Mahomes. You take away the risk of Anthony Richardson. It could work out very strongly in your favor that you get Richardson. He breaks out. He's amazing. Everything that we want him to be. And then you still get a player like Bowers or Odunze or another veteran that's kind of in that range. That would be great. But again, it's still it's Patrick Mahomes. BTJ or Bowers at 104 and a one quarterback. Really like BTJ, but Bowers is a dog. I have Bowers ranked ahead of BTJ, so I'll still stick with Brock Bowers. I could see where if you did not have an ultra need at tight end, like if you already had Laporta, already had McBride, that the need argument would be the tiebreaker for BTJ. But if you don't have a top 5 guy at tight end already, I don't know how you just don't take Brock Bowers. He's that good. Hold on 1 second, Thomas. Water. All right. What's up, my man? Had a rookie draft yesterday. 1 quarterback, 12-team PPR, start 9. Got Odunze 103, Bowers 108. Wow, holy crap. Blake Corum at the 2.02, deep at wide receiver and tight end. Odunze and Bowers for a top 3 running back, question mark. Yeah, that's insane. The fact that I just told Ryan to take Bowers at 104 and you're over here saying that you got him at 108. That's crazy. If you could trade Odunze and Brock Bowers, I feel you definitely should get into a top 3 running back, but I feel like you could probably get a little bit more than that. I think it'd be close. Let's just wrong one. Again, I'm just checking the analyzer because it's fun. It definitely works out that you get one of the 3 for sure. Again, I just feel like you could get a little extra something. It doesn't have to be anything great, but if you get a different handcuff running back or a different wide receiver, like a Dontavian Wicks or something like that, or you get another tight end to move off of Brock Bowers, but you get Jake Ferguson or something, Like, I feel like you should be able to get, it doesn't have to be like a second round pick, but I feel like there should be something kind of useful that's not just like a throwaway piece, but something useful to you in season uh, as a contender to do that. And I'd do it. Philip, inbox offer. Give Puka and a 25 first and second, receive CD Lamb. This one to me is a little bit too much. I would do Puka in a second and Senate. I don't know if this is the same person or not, but if they wanted Senate or you were trying to get rid of Senate, like I would do Puka, Senate in a second to do CD Lamb, but I would not do Puka and a first, let alone Puka and a first plus. So that's a little too much. So I'd still take that side. But I'm not opposed to trading Puka plus for CD Lamb. Should I trade Zach Moss for Ray Davis? This kind of stems with the Monty Najee one, where it's like there's really no upside to do it. Like I think at worst, Zach Moss and Ray Davis have like the same floor, and also kind of ish. But also Moss, I think, has the ceiling of being the potential starter. Like if he is the starting running back over Chase Brown, then that's just going to raise his ceiling a lot more because Ray Davis is not going to be the starter unless James Cook gets hurt. So this kind of is the same situation where like there's really no incentive to do this. I think Zach Moss has a higher ceiling because if he becomes a starter for the Bengals, then it's going to raise his ceiling. So I would just keep Zach Moss because their floors are basically the same. Like their floors are like they're each 30, 35% running backs in the backfield as like an RB1B or RB2. Just made the AJ Brown trade. Let's go, dude. That was an awesome trade. I love that so much. Mercantage plays 12 team Superflex PPR start 10. JJ and Bateman for Garrett Wilson and 2 mid 25 bursts. My phone is blowing up right now. Holy crap. I would. Ooh. Holy crap. The value is on the Garrett Wilson side, but it's also Justin Jefferson. If you believe that Garrett Wilson is going to break out, I will take the Garrett Wilson in 2 mid firsts. Especially if there's a possibility that either of those 2 firsts could potentially swing earlier, then that would be fun. I think I would take the shot on Garrett Wilson in the mid first, or 2 firsts. But if you are a little bit risk averse and you're not really into first round picks, maybe you don't feel confident in your rookie drafting ability, maybe you don't love Garrett Wilson as much, I have no problem just taking Justin Jefferson here and just keeping JJ. So I feel like I kind of rode the fence on that, but kind of still left the decision up to you. But that's kind of like how I would approach it in terms of what your feelings are on Garrett Wilson, on drafting rookies, on Justin Jefferson. Because at the end of the day, it's Justin Jefferson. That's fantastic. So, and if Garrett Wilson doesn't break out, this is probably swinging even harder to JJ next year. Last week, I asked if I should have traded the 108 for Barkley. Now I feel I definitely shouldn't have. In my defense, I did not expect your league to let Brock Bowers slide to the 1.08. That's insane. Michael, 10 team Superflex, half PPR, start 9, tight end premium, have 2, 3, and 5. Drafted Caleb, Jaden, and Odunze. Oh my gosh. The only other quarterback I have is Aaron Rodgers. Should I trade one of the rookie QBs for a proven quarterback? I don't think you need to. I'm assuming your team is kind of in a rebuild mode, and I might be looking to get out of that if some of the rookies do well, some of the other players on your team do well. I don't feel like you need to trade Caleb and Jaden. I'm not like unless you can flip Jaden for Kyler or somebody like that, then I would do that. But like I don't think that there's an incentive here for this either, where you have to move off of those guys. Because I really like Caleb Williams and I really like Jaden Daniels. And Aaron Rodgers, I think, is a great QB3. So I think that you could just keep just ride this wave and just see what happens. And unless you get a good value on a proven quarterback, but I think Caleb and Jaden are both going to be potential QB1s this year, if not like easy QB1s this year. And if that happens, you're going to be so happy that you have both of them, you know? So I just keep them. Cameron, if you're rebuilding, what would you want realistically to get for Mike Evans or DeAndre Hopkins in a 12-team Superflex, start 11, half PPR, 0.1 per carry, 0.5 first down reception bonus? Nice. D-Hop is easy. I would take any second-round pick for D-Hop. 25 second-round pick. That's what I want. Mike Evans, I want more than that. I think Evans is a 2 second-round pick guy. If you can get a 25 first, that would be fantastic. I would even take a 26 first for Mike Evans as a rebuilder and just move that age off your roster, move the production off your roster, get a liquid asset in the first that you can play around with later. So any first-round pick for Mike Evans, any second-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. If you don't get that for Evans, then I would try for 2 second-round picks or like a younger player in a second, that kind of thing. Like Jameson Williams in a second for Mike Evans. You could do that. That'd be good too. Because then you get the shot on JMO hitting and a younger guy and anything like that. Christian Watson in a second. Caleb, how much would you trust a running back room of Jonathan Taylor, Kenneth Walker, Zamir White, and David Montgomery for a competing team next year? Are there any of these that I should look to upgrade? As a competing team, I think this is great. I have my personal feelings on Kenneth Walker and Zamir White. I have this like nagging, annoying like voice in my head saying that Zamir White is this year's Alexander Madison. So, and I also believe that Zamir White is a complete 1-year rental because I don't think that he has any value after this year outside of just returning to handcuff status. So if you could flip Zamir White for somebody who has a little bit more longevity, I would love to do that. Right now, I was honestly shocked by the value that Zamir White had in our DLF ADP. He is 2 spots behind Javonte, 1 spot behind Joe Mixon, 1 spot ahead of Tony Pollard, and 3 spots ahead of Ramondre Stevenson. All 4 of those guys, I would flip Zamir White for in a freaking heartbeat. So if you could do that with Zamir White and just get more longevity on your team, love that. Kenneth Walker, I have my own personal feelings on, but it's more just in terms of I think that he's overvalued with his ADP being as a back-end dynasty RB1 when he's never produced a top 15 fantasy season. Not to say that Kenneth Walker is bad, and he definitely has amazing weeks to give you great production. I just think that he's slightly overvalued. That could be due to age. That could be due to still some situation, his pedigree coming into the league a couple years ago. There's other factors that I think are keeping him up there. But he just feels a little bit overvalued to where if you could trade down and you get, Josh Jacobs plus, James Cook plus, Isaiah Pacheco plus, like what, depending on what that plus is, that might be worth your while as well too. Love JT, love David Montgomery. But I think Zamir White would be the one that I would try to look to see if other people in your league value him as much. And Walker, like, I'm not actively trying to move Kenneth Walker. Like, I'm not like, sending out an offer for every single person. I'm not like hammering people for him, but you can throw him on the trade block, see what you get, see what offers happen, maybe toss 1 or 2 out of interest to you. But I'm not like, get this dude off my roster. But I am with that. I am like that with Zamir White. John's got to go. Appreciate you staying in here, bro. John's always answering everybody's questions before I get to him. I appreciate him. 12 teams start 10, must start 2 running backs. Yeah, that doesn't change anything. That's kind of what I assumed. So, yeah, that's how I would look at it, Caleb. Thanks, man. I'm rebuilding and have Kyle Pitts, Jaden Reed. You have 2 Kyle Pittses. So hopefully both those quarterbacks hit their ceiling. Thanks again. Yeah, absolutely, my man. Hopefully those guys break out as well, too. Especially Pitts. That'd be phenomenal. Would you do Puka and a first for CD? No, I would not. I think the first is too much to add to Puka to CD Lamb. That's why I'm okay kind of like coupling assets and adding on anything that like is anything less than a first. That's why I'm fine with like the second and Senate. That might feel like a first round pick ish, but it's not a first round pick, And if you just keep on tacking them on, then that's fine. But I would not do Puka in the first. I think that's too much. Would you rather be wide receiver heavy or running back heavy? I'd rather be wide receiver heavy. Um, from a dynasty, I'm taking this from a dynasty standpoint. I'd rather be wide receiver heavy because wide receivers are the least volatile position outside of like quarterbacks. But like when you're comparing the two, they're less volatile, less likely to get injured. They hold their value for much longer. They have much longer career arcs and lifespans as well. Um, More predictable, I feel like, in terms of both year to year, but also, uh, the NFL just values wide receivers way more. See Nico Collins and Jalen Waddle's contracts compared to any running back that's got a contract in the last 2-3 years. Um, so I'd rather be wide receiver heavy. And I feel like you can go through and you can Frankenstein your running back room and still be very productive. Because there are on any given year 60 to 70 running backs that have at least one RB2 week. Like 50 plus, I think is at least one RB1 week. Which is a very comparable number to the wide receiver wide receiver position as a whole as well too. I got to find the numbers or even just rerun them for 2023. But that's kind of been the trend for the last few years, where wide receivers, it makes sense. Every team's playing mostly two, if not three. So it makes sense that you could very easily go through every team, name their wide receiver one and wide receiver two. And it makes sense that at some point during the year, they would have a top 24 or even a top 12 week. You can't necessarily do that with running back. So when you go through and that's basically showing that you can have two running backs on a team or even three running backs on a team at certain points throughout the year have the ability to have a top 24 and a top 12 week. And the great thing about that is that you basically know when that running back is going to do that because more than likely it's when they get a lot of volume, and especially for the backups, they're going to get the volume when the starter's hurt. So as long as the starter doesn't get hurt in like the first quarter, we're going to know going into that week that starter's out, and those running backs, that backup running back is going to be able to have a pretty decent workload. That's why I love rostering so many handcuff running backs in Dynasty. So maybe I could flip this. I'd like to be wide receiver heavy at the top, but ultimately my running back room is going to be deeper with more players at the running back position than wide receivers. But I like to be wide receiver heavy at the top end to have more of the elite guys over there. That's my theory on that. Makes sense. Thanks. Yeah. Super long-winded. I'm terrible at keeping things concise and brief, but hopefully we got there. Drake London, not Pitts. London is fantastic as well, too. Hopefully he breaks out. Love Drake London as well. Joe, would you rather have Tyreek or Waddle and Keenan Allen? From a pure contender standpoint, I'd rather have Tyreek. If you're rebuilding or even kind of retooling or even questioning if you're going to rebuild or even questioning if you're a contender this year, I'll take Jalen Waddle and Keenan Allen. But if you're fully in on 2024, I'll take Tyreek. Yeah. This is kind of the same situation. Puka in a second for MHJ. So yeah, Puka in a first for Lamb is a little much. Oh, Phil, appreciate these Fridays. Always look forward to Fridays. Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much for being in here every single week. Specker, hey Addison, happy Friday. What are your thoughts on Sam Darnold? Feel like he's going to be a lot better than people think this year and will only gain value. There are recent reports coming out of Minnesota that Darnold is actually going to be a starter and McCarthy is going to start potentially even as a QB3 on the team, which I think is interesting, but it's only going to be a matter of time before he climbs. Darnold, to me, feels like what Mitch Trubisky was for the Steelers when they drafted Kenny Pickett. That's kind of how I view it. Maybe Darnold can hold off McCarthy longer, depending on McCarthy's development. But I think that he's going to gain value from now until the start of the season. I don't think he's going to gain value once the season starts. So I think he's fine to have now, but I would probably look to be trading him in August around the preseason, if not even leading up to like week 1 or something like that, because he could be the starter, but I don't think he holds on to that starting role. That's kind of how I view it. Whiskey, you're on the clock. I have BTJ and Brooks in the same tier. I have BTJ ranked ahead of Brooks though, but they are the same tier. But yeah, Whiskey Traveler, I'll take BTJ. If you get to 10 11 in your rookie draft and Brooks and Benson are still there, would you take both? Absolutely taking Brooks. 100%. If you get to 10 11 and Brooks and BTJ are there, those are the two picks. If you get to 10 11 and BTJ is there by himself, that's your pick. If you get to that point and Brooks is still there, I'm taking that. But if these three receivers are already gone, then yeah, I'll take Brooks and Benson. Yeah, and a one quarterback. So Nix isn't in this conversation. Yep. Give me Brooks and Benson for the 10 and 11. Yeah, I like that a lot. Trading down from Herbert to T-Law on a competing team, would you rather have JSN, Swift, or Mike Evans? I will take. I'll stick with what I was initially. I'll take JSN. I think he's the highest ranked out of all these guys. Has the most probability to gain a lot of value as well too. And I think that even like from a production side, I know you're competing and stuff like that. Like so that might push you towards Mike Evans, but JSN and Mike Evans could have a very comparable season. With Mike Evans losing, like if the Buccaneers offense as a whole regresses, or even Mike Evans himself regresses, Chris Godwin gets a little bit more. They lose Dave Canales, so maybe Baker takes a step back. Or all the stuff about the new offensive coordinator from the McVay tree and Godwin running from the slot, then that would boost Godwin's production, hindering Mike Evans's production. So JSN and Mike Evans might ultimately produce very, very similarly. And if that's the case, I'd rather have the younger guy, the guy who's younger by like almost 10 years. Swift, I think, is fine, but I'd still just go for Jackson Smith and Jigba. Getting T-Law and JSN for Herbert, I think is absolutely amazing. That's an amazing trade if you can pull that off. Sean, outlook on Nick Chubb and some running backs that you would use him to pivot to with his current situation. I am a little bit scared about Nick Chubb just because of how destructive that knee injury was. Jerome Ford looked pretty solid. The team as a whole is probably going to try and go back to be a little bit more run heavy and not be what it was with Joe Flacco last year. And even to a certain extent, Deshaun Watson was pretty high in volume too. So I think they're going to try and go back to being a little bit more run heavy. So there's probably going to be enough for both Ford and Nick Chubb. I'm just a little bit worried about Chubb because of his age coming off so soon from the injury. So if you are looking for running backs to pivot to, he is also in that kind of same Zamir White range. So if you can go up to Monty or Javonte or Mixon or Pollard or Ramondre or even Najee, that's kind of what I would. Those are some of the running backs that I would look to pivot off of Chubb over for. And if you get anything added on top of any of those running backs, then I think that's an automatic win. So that's kind of the group that I'd be looking at. Keenan almost feels like a wash this year, maybe like a Pat's Ocho type of role. One of those Bears wide receivers is going to be the odd man out. Yeah. Keenan's just so good, though. Somebody comped him to Buccaneers Antonio Brown, which I think was pretty interesting. I heard that a few weeks ago. Buccaneers Antonio Brown is what Keenan Allen is going to be. Which AB had weeks. He had a good role there still because they just passed so freaking much. And maybe that's kind of a similar thing that happens. But I could see Keenan starting out the year well, and then like Odunze just like imposes his talent and forces his way in. I kind of low key, like I just don't really want any of those wide receivers from like a redraft standpoint this year. Outside of Caleb, like I don't really want to have to make a decision between any of the wide receivers, but you know who's going to benefit from having all those wide receivers is Caleb Williams. So that's why that's like my redraft take on that. That's a good option and piece of advice as well too. Wait for Chubb to start performing. The fear, though, I think, is what if we get into the first couple weeks of the season and Nick Chubb isn't really looking all that good, you know? Then he could lose some value because then we're talking about 28-year-old, going to be 29, doesn't look good. There is risk that if he doesn't perform initially, that he loses a lot of value. So there might be some benefit in also just trading him now. There's a hair floating. I think this is probably ultimately what it's going to end up being. I think DJ's got a pretty good role locked in, and it is just going to be Keenan and Rome because Keenan and Rome kind of feel similar in an extent. Garrison, 10 team Superflex PPR start 10. Allen and Levis, White, Singletary, have the 101, 106 through 9, 201. Would you draft Williams, then wide receiver, or Marvin Harrison, and then quarterback at the 6? So you have Josh Allen and Will Levis. Ooh. I would still go Caleb Williams. So that follows the rule. Justin and I have had this rule all draft season, basically, that if you don't have 2 top 10 quarterbacks, you should just take Caleb Williams. So that follows that rule. So you take Caleb Williams at the 101. Maybe you can get Odunze at the 106. You get Brian Thomas Jr. at the 109. You get Brock Bowers at the 7. Maybe you get another quarterback anyway at the 108. 2.01 is probably another wide receiver. Or maybe you say screw the quarterbacks and you just take Odunze, Bowers, BTJ, and Brooks, and then you get a wide receiver at the 2.01. That could work as well too. So you still get some of the wide receivers, just not Marvin Harrison Jr., but you still get some very good options with you get both Odunze and BTJ. Hopefully, you also get Bowers and you get Caleb Williams. So I'd go for Caleb Williams with the 101. If Kirk Cousins does miss time for whatever reason and Michael Penix start and is really, really good, would you sell right away in a rebuild? Probably. I just don't think that Penix is going to be really, really good. I mean, it's certainly a possibility, especially with the weapons that he has. I just don't think that Penix is that good of a quarterback. So yeah, that would probably end up being the result, in my opinion, of Penix is if he were to come out because Cousins got hurt and look good, I'd probably be calling to flip him. Yeah. Been tracking this this BTJ Worthy Benson conversation. It's a pretty good one. I like it a lot. All right, we've been going for almost 90 minutes now, so this might be last call if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up for the week. My sister-in-law graduates from high school this week or tonight. So we got to go to that grad party tomorrow. Fun stuff. Thanks, man. Have a good weekend. Need to get back to work. Sorry I couldn't hold you away from work any longer. Appreciate you in here, Michael. Thanks for asking the questions, and hopefully I gave you good answers. I know draft capital greater than, but would you reach on Franklin over any of Leggett, Polk, Pearsall? I have Franklin ranked over Polk and Pearsall. Polk and Pearsall. I 100% acknowledge that is Troy Franklin bias because I loved him so much before the draft. I 100% acknowledge the bias. I 100% acknowledge that that is a bad process. But I believe in Troy Franklin. So I personally am willing to take him over Polk and Pearsall. I would take Xavier Leggett over Troy Franklin. So you have my seal of approval, but only if you think that you're just as crazy as I am, because that process is really, really bad. But I don't care because I love Troy Franklin. I love the situation that he landed in. And I think he's a good wide receiver. I think the NFL messed that one up. I truly do. Because I still haven't heard any reason as to why he fell. If there was a health concern, a heart issue, a knee issue. He doesn't have cartilage. He has, sickle cell anemia. I don't know. I haven't heard any of that outside of just it. They think that he's not good. And I think the NFL got that one wrong. You're willing to crash and burn on it. All right. Perfect. Because so am I. So I'm willing to, I will still take Leggett over Franklin, but I would take Franklin over the other two. Paul, in a 12-team, one quarterback, half PPR, what would you pay for running backs in the Singletary Pollard range? First of all, I don't view Singletary to be in anywhere near the same range as Tony Pollard. Pollard, I would pay a couple seconds for. Devin Singletary, I think, is at best a third-round pick, to be honest with you. Maybe a late second, but I would take Jalen Wright over Devin Singletary. I'd probably take Blake Corum over Devin Singletary. Pollard, I think, is just in a higher range. So I'd pay a couple seconds for Tony Pollard. Singletary, I'd pay, if it's a late 25 first, sure, but even that feels like a lot. I'd pay a few thirds, or if you have like a wide receiver 7 that you can trade away for Singletary, then I would do that. What type of return do you want for a guy like Jalen Waddle? It would have to be probably 2 first. He's a 2 first kind of guy. 225 firsts for Jalen Waddle. That feels all right. I don't know if I would necessarily do that, but that feels good. If it was more of somebody like I could drop down and still get another first, like if I could get George Pickens in like a mid 25 first, I might do that. If I could get BTJ and a 25 first, I'd probably do that. That's kind of how I would, and anything higher than those wide receivers, like if you can get to Pittman or DJ Moore or even like Tank Dell in a first, I feel like that would probably be good value. I'd do that. You're the GOAT, man. Appreciate it. Would you guys consider doing a strengths and weaknesses video on the 25 and 26 classes? It's nice to plan on future positions to aim for. Matt hasn't done a video for us in quite some time. This might be a good video idea for him. Matt messaged me like early in the year. Matt Hicks, by the way, FF Educator. He has his own channel for rookie content. He's a big Devi guy. He did a video very specifically like this last year where he compared, I think it was 23, 24, 25, or maybe it was 22, 23, 24. I don't remember. But a video like this would be a good idea, I think, for him because he would know a lot more than me because I don't know the Devi stuff like that. I don't know college as well. But yeah, that's a good idea. I'll hit Matt up. He hadn't been doing content because he had a lot of like real life stuff come in. I think he was like buying a house and they were moving and blah, blah, doing all that kind of crap. So he kind of took some time away from outside of his YouTube channel, but I'll hit him up. That's a good idea. I like that a lot. Speaking of personal things, next Friday, I'm going to do the stream again next Friday, but it will be the last Friday afternoon stream that I do until July. My wife and I are expecting our first child. We go into the hospital for an induction on the 11th, June 11th. So I will be in baby mode. So next Friday, will be still the same next Friday at noon Eastern time. But then I will not be able to stream until we get to July. But then we'll get into the season. We'll get into, the summer training camp, preseason, all that kind of fun stuff. And then we'll probably transition into the show with John Paulson as well in season to help you guys with waiver wires and trades and start sit decisions. And it'll be so much fun. Thank you guys. But yeah, so next week, regularly scheduled, and then we'll go into July. But yeah, appreciate all of you guys hanging out for the past 90 minutes. Dad life is the best. We're very excited. I'm very excited as well. So it should be fun. But yeah, appreciate you guys hanging out for the past 90 minutes. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic rest of your Friday, a fantastic weekend as well too. We will see you guys next Friday. Maybe I'll convince Justin to come on for the last one before we get into the real summer grind of it. We'll see. But yeah, appreciate you guys. We'll see you next Friday. Later. Oh, if you leave a comment down below in the actual video after the stream ends, I will answer that as well too. If you have more questions or I didn't get to them, drop a comment down in the video after the stream ends, and I will reply to it. But appreciate you guys. We'll see y'all.